Morning. It is a cold but bright day here in Bath. As you can see, I'm at the train station ready to get my train to London for the much anticipated General Synod sessions. If we've not met before, my name's Matt, or as I'll be saying in London, Matt or Bath and Wells 248. And as usual, I'm going to take you along for the ride. I'm going to try and give you some highlights, some insights, have a few conversations with people, a bit of behind the scenes stuff, and just keep you updated on the life of Synod. There's a lot happening, there's a lot to be prepared for. I'll do my best to explain it as we go along, and I'll take you on the journey. As you can tell, we've made it to London. We've got the Houses Apartment right behind me, and also behind me we've got the Bath and Wells guys, Bishop Michael and the gang. We've got together to have lunch before it all kicks off, have a bit of time together, just catch up, and see how we can represent our diocese the best. Make sure we're communicating well with one another so that we can communicate well in Synod. So we've just been praying together, which has been a really beautiful way to start the time of Synod. Great to hear where we're all at. And Nick, how are you feeling ahead of these sessions?
I'm feeling in a good place, actually. It's really good that we've got a really close set of reps in Bath and Wells who, though while we have different views on different issues, there's a real kind of grace and willingness to come together. So we've got sunshine, we've just shared some lunch, we prayed together in the park, and I hope that the spirit we've got, you can see the bishop laughing in the background, that will follow through, and it'll be a good week for the church, and we'll all be together by the end of it.
Amazing, thank you, Nick. Okay. And we're going to try keep up to date with a load of the Bath and Wells guys as we go throughout, try get some catch-ups and highlights throughout. But I'll take you as we start things off. So we've just arrived in the chamber, things are about to kick off, people are slowly beginning to come in, and yeah, just sat down. How are we feeling, Fraser?
Feeling good. A bit heavy, given all that's going to be talked about the next few days, but feeling good.
There we go. I think there's going to be some good stuff to come. And here we go. Listen to that. We're about to begin. Filled with laughter, songs of joy. It's just finished up for day one. Questions are still going on, and there's still worship to come. But there are a fair few events happening tonight, little fringe meetings where different people are getting together. So we've got the first one now. We're heading across to a second one as well. It's been a bit of a full-on half day. It feels like we've been here longer, but I'll give a little summary when I get back to my hotel later on, and maybe I'll give you a little bit of highlights of this evening as well.
And they used to do a prayer walk on a Friday night on the landings.
Just heading back to the hotel now after dinner with a few friends. It's quite nice to get the sights. Got Westminster behind me, end up with Big Ben, the eye in the background. I'll update you on the proceedings of the day when we get home. But Fraser's still here. Fraser, you feeling a bit more optimistic now?
Hello, yes, feeling very positive.
He's in good spirits.
God is good.
Amen. He's in good spirits. And there we go. We have made it to the end of day one. We've made it back to the Premier Inn. And although it was a half day, it felt a little bit longer. But I'm going to run you through quick fire what's happened today. As you saw, we started off with lunch with the Bath and Wells gang. Great opportunity just to catch up, see how one another are doing, hear what's been happening, spend a bit of time eating and praying together. I've been really encouraged actually recently. We met before online, but also here now in person. Just the way we're journeying together, it's no secret we hold significantly different views on certain topics, and we've got a broad representation for our diocese. But we've done well, I think, to listen to one another, to love one another, and to be praying for one another, and just praying that the Lord's will be done. And as Bishop Michael pointed out, if the whole Synod approached it in a similar way to how we've been approaching it with one another, things might go better than anticipated. But we then headed into Church House, got ourselves in the chamber, started off with a little bit of the remote meetings, a quick motion that got passed fairly quickly. Just say that those on Zoom could join us for various reasons, couldn't be in the chamber, but made sure that they can take part in the Synod sessions. Then at a time of worship, followed by introductions and welcomes, a classic bit of welcomes to people who weren't quite in the chamber yet. A certain bishop may have got a round of applause as they arrived ever so slightly after they'd been welcomed. All good fun. Followed by the presidential address by Archbishop Justin. A great call towards unity, some really important words for this time. And a great reflection on Genesis 11, the story of the Tower of Babel and the way in which actually our language is going to be so important over the next few days. I'd recommend reading it or watching it if you're able to do so. Without the business report or the report by the business committee, where we're just looking at the session ahead of us, how it's been decided, a take note debate which we voted to take note of after some good sort of questions and challenges. One of my favourite ones was, why aren't we talking about church growth? Why aren't we talking about mission? Why aren't we talking about good news? I'd love to see that on the agenda item at Synod in the future. I'm then going to cut to future Matt, because at this point I went out and had an impromptu coffee catch up with a youth working friend.
Hey, Future Matt here. My apologies, I'm actually not entirely sure what did happen with the legislative business. A lot of the time, even when I'm in the room, it slightly goes over my head. But do not fear, you can go on the Synod website. You can see the way in which we voted for everything, if you are intrigued to know exactly what happened. But let's go back to where we were at.
And that's what happened in the legislative business. We then got back in the chamber for Living in Love and Faith, a presentation of the Standing Orders 107, the Bishop of London, Bishop Sarah, sharing sort of the journey we've been on, where we're sort of at, and some key reflections ahead of the debates yet to come. There was then a slightly interesting video that was played. It seemed to be after the College of Bishops met, maybe before the House of Bishops met, I'm not entirely sure. But it seemed to suggest that certain things may have already been decided. I don't know, it finished and there was a bit of an awkward silence afterwards. I think there were a few people perplexed by it, but we then moved on to an equally perplexing time of questions, the great opportunity where we get to ask 2 questions if we would like to in advance to get written response, and then the opportunity to ask supplementary to either our own questions or other people's. And it's a great opportunity actually just to hear what's going on in other parts of the church, to hear what other people are passionate about, to hear some of the things that we may not have thought about ourselves. There's a few usual suspects who like to ask a lot of questions, but also it's a great opportunity to hear from those you maybe don't usually get to. I'll be honest, I dipped out a little bit earlier. I had another engagement that I was going along to, a little reception, just to hear about some of the things that God's been doing across the country, some of the ways he's been moving and growing churches, and some of the powerful testimonies of people serving their local church. Before heading to some dinner with some friends, we had a time of worship which was great, and an opportunity just to look at business and pray again for the time ahead and catch up with people we've not seen in quite a while. As you saw, my friend Fraser was on good form. We made it back to the hotel. That was the end of the day. There was evening worship. I'll do my best to get there for tomorrow. But I'm also going, and this is a bit of accountability here, a bit of commitment, I'm going to a morning prayer tomorrow. I've said it, I'm going to have to go now, but it'll be a great opportunity to pray with some friends tomorrow morning. And I will take you on the journey for tomorrow when we get there.
Good morning. As you can see, the sun has risen up behind me. It is a lovely start to the day, day 2, a little bit earlier on. We're heading across for a little prayer breakfast, or a prayer meeting, should I say. We've got our breakfast at hand, a couple of pastries to keep us going for the day. And looking forward to what's on the agenda, looking forward to catching up with a few friends as well, and also just starting the day in prayer, praying for the church, praying for growth, praying for our brothers and sisters across the country who are doing incredible things in the name of the Lord. But I'll take you with us. We've got a lot on today, and I'll do my best to capture some of the highlights. So I'm just here with Ali. Ali organised the prayer meeting this morning. Ali, what was it we were going after? What was you seeing God do?
We're just trying to put church planting, establishing new Christian communities on the agenda of Synod. We just believe that to reach people that the church isn't currently reaching, we need to do the stuff that the church isn't currently doing, and to have new Christian communities dot up all over the place that are reaching young people, reaching unchurched people. And so we're just praying that it's high on the agenda of Synod, that we're going to talk about it, we're going to hopefully make it easier for people to plant churches, to reach people that aren't in church. And so just prayed, a little group of us, start something small. We just had this idea that God's doing a new thing, and we just want to be a part of that journey.
It's amazing, and you know, there's so many encouraging stories from people all across the country seeing this. I think we've got lots to learn as a diocese, but God's moving, and we just want to partner with what he's getting up to. So just here in the tea room, been praying with Janie and Abby. These guys have been super encouraging, and actually it's one of the best things about being here at Synod, one of the best things about making time in the tea room, just to catch up, support one another, encourage one another, and be praying for one another. These guys are great, doing great things across up in Rochester, and just over the road in Swindon as well, so not too far from us. But yeah, it's been a good way to start the day.
You should use the on. Yesterday, Mark the 7th.
Please show by raising your hands.
And there you go, that is the end of the day. We've made it back to the hotel after what feels like quite a long day. As you saw, started off really well with a time of prayer with some friends, getting together to seek the Lord's guidance and pray for a fresh outpouring of His Spirit in our diocese, across the country, and through mixed ecology, fresh expressions, through church plans, revitalisation projects, all the ways in which the Lord is moving in new and powerful ways. Really encouraging time. There was Holy Communion. I actually missed that. I was praying with some friends instead, as you saw, but eventually we got to business, and we started off with a bit of legislative business, a bit of special agenda, but kicking things off with item 510, the Diocesan Board of Education Measure 2021, basically getting updated to 2023 regulations. It was quite a simple motion, just updating a few things here and there, nothing controversial, but just to make sure we're in good standing. We then moved on to item 509, the Church of England Miscellaneous Provisions Measure, which basically clumps a whole lot of things together that the revision committee have put together. And it's so we don't have to go through each individual thing, have to take note, vote, all sorts, but rather we can clump it together, acknowledge it, and move through. But there were some great speeches that were made, especially surrounding bishops' mission orders and the way in which that currently, or under the provisions that were being proposed, termination of bishop mission orders would be basically immediate at the bishop's opinion, at their own disposal, and actually that puts clergy, that puts families and laity and all these other things that come with it a little bit at risk. It's not a great place to be, and actually we really want to value and support bishops' mission orders. So some great speeches of that. There were no amendments tabled as such at that point, but we voted to take note of that debate, to take another report. It then got a little bit complex with some of the legal amendments. I got a little bit lost and confused, but we adjourned the business because we had to move on to the loyal address. Item 7, Justin Welby bringing the presentation that will be brought forward to His Majesty the King. It was a great time to sort of honour the late Queen, but also recognise that the King in many ways has been ahead of his time, with especially thinking about environmental impacts as something that we can definitely be working on in our diocese with our target for net zero carbon, all these things. It was a quick item of business. We didn't have too much time. There were a couple of extra speeches from the prolocutor and also the chair of the House of Laity before moving on and passing that motion, because we then had questions. All these questions were based on the Living Love and Faith process. Bishop Sarah did a great job, not an easy job by any means. All of the questions asked. A lot of answers are relying on what's going to be the pastoral guidance that we don't yet know. It feels a little bit like we're writing a blank check, but we're going to have to trust our bishops and make sure that anything ideally gets brought back to the Synod. I'm sure will be debated tomorrow when we get to that. We then broke off for lunch. I had lunch with a friend, caught up. Really encouraging time before coming back for item 9, the resourcing ministerial formation. Great speeches made, looking at the ways in which we're investing in ministry formation, not just for clergy or ordinands, should I say, but for laity as well. Some really great speeches, some really important concerns raised around this, but it is ultimately been passed. We voted for it. We're going to be monitoring it closely, as it says in the item of business, but look forward to seeing that. We need great people trained in great theological colleges, resourced properly so that they can do the work. We then had the much anticipated Living in Love and Faith group work, and I went into this, if I'm honest, probably more optimistic than I came out of it. It was quite a tough afternoon. It was a great opportunity to meet some new people, just to share quite openly how we're feeling, looking at the pastoral guidances and the ways in which we were responding. And yeah, if I'm honest, it was heavy. My group was heavy. I didn't quite realise maybe just how wide we've drifted from one another. We've got an interesting day ahead tomorrow, but I'm very grateful for the 3 bishops that we had in our group who came to listen. Very grateful for the openness and vulnerability that people shared. Very grateful that the Lord is good, and we're going to need His grace, because I'm not entirely sure how we're going to hold things together without it. So please, I know it will have already happened, but I'm sure so many of you have been praying, and we'll be praying and continuing tonight. There was then evening worship before people headed off their separate ways. I didn't really film too much in the afternoon, if I'm honest. I was feeling a little bit low, a bit burdened by the weight of what's going on. But God is good, and we will see what tomorrow brings. I'll take you along with me. I'm going to get some rest, get some sleep, and I'll bring you along tomorrow.
Good morning. As you can see, the sun is not quite shining today. I don't know whether that's a statement for the day ahead, but it is a nice morning here. Sleep was not overly great, but we're going into today as optimistic as we can be. We're trusting that the Lord is good. There's lots of things happening. It's not just the LLF debate, but I think that's the big one. There's going to be a lot of press, probably a lot of protesters. And, I'm just praying that we all speak with grace, but we also speak with truth, you know. God is good. We want back to the good news, and we'll see what comes out of it.
Down 7% in 2022.
But there's something missing, which is the prophetic voice of the church.
There we go. We have made it to the end of day 3. If I'm honest, a very, very heavy and taxing day. A day of 2 halves, you could say. I'll run you through what went down. We start off the day with the cost of living. Canon Dr. John Spence is phenomenal. He was phenomenal again, bringing forward this motion, looking at the cost of living crisis, looking at the way we need to be praying, but we need to be acting as individuals, as churches, as dioceses, as the church, whilst also calling on the government to be doing more. There were 5 amendments in total. They were all welcomed by John Spence ahead of time. He said that just so that'd be more opportunity to hear the stories, to hear the voices that matter, and to allow for greater time to debate. It was well received, and I'm very pleased to say that everyone present in the chamber when we got to it voted in favour by counted vote for this motion. Although I will say it was a little bit disheartening, as someone raised, that the Synod chamber was significantly empty. For such an important thing in our country at this time, it was very sad to see the chamber so empty, especially in comparison to later on that day. After which we moved towards some legislative business, looking towards the draft parochial fees. I'll be honest, at that point I did leave the chamber. However, I know Archdeacon Adrian was in there. He was keen to get to know what was going on there, and if you have any questions, do hit him up. I'm sure he'd love to explain that for the Bath and Wells guys. A few of us went for a slightly early lunch. We wanted to make sure we were ready for the afternoon's entertainment as such, but had a good time, had some lunch, sharing stories of what God's been doing with friends from across the country, and Bishop Michael came and joined us. It was brilliant. Going into the afternoon, living in love and faith. If I am incredibly honest, I found it a very tough afternoon. The room was not as heavy as I thought it potentially could be, or the atmosphere anyway, but I left feeling slightly discouraged, I think is probably fair to say. There were lots of speeches made. Bishop of London started by bringing forward the motion, and then we took the amendments one by one. It's worth saying that we actually haven't finished this item of business yet. We're going to have to go back in tomorrow morning to complete it. But to give you a brief highlight, I guess you could say, there were various amendments that were withdrawn straight away to save a bit of time. Very grateful for that. Ones that were straight up rejected, ones that were then voted against, and the procedure felt a little bit repetitive. It felt a little bit interesting, that for most of them, every amendment so far has fallen, most of which by a vote by House, which means in order to get through, we need all 3 houses to at least agree. There was 2 occasions where that didn't quite happen. We had a count of the Synod for 1 amendment from Jane Ozanne that didn't go through, 45, but items 44, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59 and 60 were all voted down by a vote by House. If we don't know what that means, it basically means that our count is counted, but we have to see the fors and the against per house of the House of Bishops, laity and clergy, and if there is a failing in one of them, then the motion is rejected. It felt a very strategic thing. It felt a real shame, given it was a matter of process that was I guess in a way speeding things up, but also not particularly allowing for anything to get past. It felt strange that the bishop, who I do not envy whatsoever, Bishop Sarah was brilliant given the task she has at hand, wasn't warmed too much, and only two sort of noticeable points. One which in item 53, the House of Laity voted for amendment 53 because it basically changed the language from welcoming to note, which may seem little but has significant implications. Similarly, the House of Laity, and I think item 56 voted for, which basically requested a draft of the for the General Synod to be brought forward in light of the pastoral guidance ahead of time. Other than that, it was a little bit repetitive. We went around in a little bit of a circle, but lots was debated, lots of opinions were heard. I felt very conflicted. I think I've been feeling this the last couple of days. It feels like we're probably more divided than I maybe first thought. And if I'm completely honest, I was not feeling great after the time together. We had an incredible time of worship. It was the first time we actually had the songs that I recognised. It was charismatic or contemporary worship, I guess you could say, for the first time in Synod. So I was very grateful for that. And if I'm being vulnerable and honest, I absolutely was snotting, tearing right the way through that evening worship. Reminded of how good God is even when things around us don't feel good. And I appreciate people be experiencing that in different ways, with different convictions. But yeah, it was a heavy one. I didn't particularly enjoy it. I'm not particularly looking forward to tomorrow as we go back into it. And as I say, it feels like maybe I thought we were here and we're more further across than perhaps I first anticipated. However, we had a dinner as a diocese in the evening afterwards. I wish I'd probably filmed something of it. Very grateful for it. I went in not feeling too great, but left feeling significantly better. And we have a very wide breadth of representation theologically in our diocese in Bath and Wells, as I'm sure you're all aware. But just to break bread and enjoy one another's company, hear a bit more about people's lives and what's going on outside of Synod was greatly appreciated. And I think that was experienced by all, so very grateful for that. A long day ahead tomorrow. We're going back into it. I'm looking forward to getting to my bed. I'm feeling very emotionally, physically, spiritually exhausted. And yeah, got lots of praying to do tonight, as I'm sure we all do. But I'll take you along tomorrow for the final day, and I'll seek to do an update either when I'm back in Bath that evening or the following day. But for now, we need to get some rest. We need to pray, and we need to remember that God is so good, even when we're not.
Good morning, it's the final day of the Synod. We're resuming the business from yesterday. I know it's obviously late to say pray now, but I'm sure you all are praying. And yeah, it was very gracious yesterday. Something I forgot to mention was how good the chair was. Jeffrey Tassel was phenomenal. Very grateful that he's steering the ship as such, and also very grateful that the tone of the debate so far has been very generous, very kind, and I'm hoping that continues today. Feeling more optimistic after some sleep and prayer, but we'll see what the day's got ahead of us.
My first response is to Rob. Rob, thank you for what you have said.
Day is over, just heading towards the station to head home. I'll update you all when we get back to Bath on how it all went down. There you go, I've arrived back in Bath. It's already a little bit late, but it'll be even later by the time I get up the hill. So I'll come back with the report of today tomorrow at some point. But it'll be edited in, it'll be the next thing you see. And I'll do my very best to explain what happened today. It felt a lot more positive for me. For a lot, I think it felt a lot more positive. But we'll get into that as we do the recap. Hey, a few days have passed. I may have taken the weekend to rest after what was a very long and heavy synod. But if anything, it's given me more time to reflect upon what actually did happen, because it feels like there's a lot of confusion about what went down. Of course, there was more than just the LLF debate that happened on Thursday. We will get to that, but I'm going to jump back in with the morning. I think I mentioned on the Thursday morning that Jeffrey Tattersall, who had been chairing the debate, had been phenomenal. He continued to be so. And actually, at the very end of the debate, the Synod gave him a standing ovation. You may have seen that in the news. It was used on some websites and some news channels slightly misleadingly, but the Synod did stand to clap and applaud the way in which he chaired it so brilliantly. I also want to say thank you to so many individuals from so many different perspectives that stood up and shared so vulnerably. And personally, for lots of them, it's a very significant thing to do, to share your stories and to share what God's been doing in such a way and in such a public space as well. So I'm very grateful for that. It very much contributed to the debate in a very positive light. I tried to contribute to the debate myself. I stood up and sat down a lot. I got my squats in, you could say. I wasn't called, but that's okay. There were many phenomenal speeches and many voices that probably needed to be heard more than my own in this debate. The day started very much as we felt like we left it. We continued to go through amendments. We've continually falling through the vote by houses. The process seemed rather questionable. There was a point of order that raised the fact that, in a way, the bishops had the ability to veto anything that they didn't particularly like through using the vote by houses. Not that they were calling for them, not that I'm sure that was their intention either. But during that point of order, there was a loud and long clap and applause throughout the chamber, which was interesting to say the least. But what is of note, I'm not going to go through each amendment one by one. It is worth noting that 4 of these amendments throughout this time were voted by the House of Laity, but fell due to the Houses of Bishop and Clergy voting against. As I said yesterday, or as I mentioned for yesterday's ones, it only takes one of the houses to vote against for the item to fall, which made it very surprising, I think, and slightly impressive that item 67 was our one and only amendment added to the motion. Mr. Andrew Corns from Chichester moved at the end of the motion to add an extra clause that endorsed the decision of the College and the House of Bishops not to propose any change to the doctrine of marriage, and their intention that the final version of the Prayers of Love and Faith should not be contrary to or indicative of a departure from the doctrine of the Church of England. Now, that may just sound like a lot of complicated words. What I think that means is that actually the doctrine of marriage is not changing. It is not going to change. It is between a man and a woman, as our historic teaching and doctrine has been in the Church of England. But it also means that the prayers of love and faith are going to have to reflect that. They can't afford to be contrary or indicative of a departure from the doctrine of the Church of England. That means that refining it, as the bishops are going to be doing, there's going to have to be a lot of legal work to make sure that it is neither of those things. So it'll be very interesting to see what we get brought back in July. I was surprised this motion got passed. It got voted through, or this amendment got passed in every house, the bishops, the clergy and the laity. And although it was a very close vote in clergy and laity, it seems significant the bishops had shifted for the first time, voting majority in favour for this amendment. And there was then an amendment that was then lost, and that was the end of the amendments. We went back to the main motion to debate it. Again, we heard more speeches before finally coming to a time of prayer just before we voted. And the result was that we voted in favour of the motion. It was very split. It was very tight in clergy and laity, the bishops more prominently voting for. But what that means is, I'm going to read it just because it is long, it's slightly confusing, but it's good to make sure we know exactly what's happening, because I think it's been misrepresented and we may have been misled by lots of articles, opinion pieces, and even the news in some cases. But the motion that we voted for says this: that this synod, recognising the commitment to learning and deep listening to God and to each other of the living in love and faith process, and desiring with God's help to journey together while acknowledging the different deeply held convictions within the church. A, lament and repent of the failure of the church to be welcoming to LGBTQI plus people and the harm that LGBTQI plus people have experienced and continue to experience in the life of the church. B, recommit to our shared witness to God's love for and acceptance of every person by continuing to embed the pastoral principles in our life together, locally and nationally. C, commend the continued learning together enabled by the living in love and faith process and resources in relation to identity, sexuality, relationships and marriage. D,
hey, really sorry, Matt from the future. I just realised whilst editing that I said the letter D, then started reading E. They both start with welcome. But that's just how confusing this is. Even when it's right in front of me, when I'm reading it, I'm getting it wrong. But just so that we've got it clear and on the record, I'm going to add this in. Item D, not E, D is welcome the decision of the House of Bishops to replace issues in human sexuality with new pastoral guidance. It then goes to E, that's E, not D, which is this. Welcome the response from the College of Bishops and look forward to the House of Bishops further refining, commending and issuing the prayers of love and faith described in GS 2289 and its annexes. F, invite the House of Bishops to monitor the Church's use of and response to the prayers of love and faith once they had been commended and published, and to report back to Synod in 5 years' time. And then added is G, the amendment. Endorse the decision of the College and House of Bishops not to propose any change to the doctrine of marriage, and their intention that the final version of prayers and love and faith should not be contrary or indicative of a departure from the doctrine of the Church of England. A lot of words, a lot of mouthful, and understandably a lot of confusion. What I think this means, and what I think we voted for, is that the doctrine of marriage is not going to change. These are the highlights as such. The doctrine of marriage is not going to change. It's between a man and a woman. The prayers will have to reflect this because they can't afford to be contrary to or indicative of a departure from that doctrine. I also think this then has reflections on A and also D, because replacing issues in human sexuality, the doctrine isn't changing. Therefore, the new pastoral guidance will also have to reflect that in some way. We're yet to see that. That's a bit of a blank check, as a number of people mentioned. But also, I think importantly for a lot of people to understand is that in A as well, it means that it's not the teaching or the traditional teaching that sex and marriage and all these things between a man and a woman is what is causing harm, but rather the way in which people have been or have experienced said teaching and the way in which it has potentially been damaging in its practice or outworking of said teaching, which is interesting. It leaves us in an interesting place where we're going to have to wait to see what the prayers look like in July. It's been made very clear by Archbishop Stephen that they're not going to be for use until that time, until they're properly commended. And I think there's going to be a lot of legal work going on behind the background. The pastoral guidance that is going to come, I think, is going to be really significant. It feels like it's got a lot to answer for. Again, being quite a blank check as such means it's got all sorts to answer for, as was evident during our question time. I was surprised, if I'm honest. I was surprised that we voted for this motion. It was a very tight vote in the clergy and laity, less so in the House of Bishops. But I was surprised for two reasons. I personally voted against it in good conscience. I feel like it's a step in the wrong direction in the way in which the Lord teaches and leads us. Up for debate. I'm very aware of that. But I also voted against it because it felt very much like a lose. It doesn't feel like, again, not trying us and them or this side, that side, but it didn't really feel very clear. It feels like things are still confusing. It feels like things are slightly contradictory. And it leaves us in a position where technically nothing has changed. The doctrine is the same. The teaching is the same. Yet at the same time, for many, it will feel like a significant change.
And whether you're feeling that in a positive way or a negative way, I know different people from different expressions and traditions and perspectives are feeling that in a big way. And whichever your perspective on this, I want to encourage you that this is not the time to leave. I've had a number of really sad conversations where people are already talking about leaving. I know people already have left. It's not the time to leave. We are going to journey through this, hopefully journeying together towards what the Lord has for us as his church, knowing that he is king on the throne. And ultimately, we don't have to worry. He's still God and we are not. But I understand it's complicated. I understand this actually puts clergy predominantly in the firing line. As a laity, it's less important for me. As bishops, it feels less important for them. But clergy are made very vulnerable by this motion from both perspectives. So that is challenging. That is what went on. That's a very long-winded way of saying not a lot has changed. But that is the details. That's what we voted for. I think there's a lot of misleading articles, opinion pieces and news headlines out there. So it's good to clarify that. And yeah, we're going to have to see what July brings. I'm going to edit another clip together for what happened in the rest of the day. But this is what happened. So post LLF, we had lunch. We all managed to have a bit of a break. And for some of us, we took a little longer break than others. Lots of different emotions and responses when the final vote came through. But we then moved on post-lunch. We looked at the draft Dyson Stipends Funds Amendment measure, which was voted through. We had a little look at amending canon number 42, a number of items approved on that as well. We then briefly got onto the governance review, a very important thing, looking at the way in which our National Church Governance Project Board, well, there was a report from those guys in the way in which it's outlined and the whole trajectory in which these national bodies are going to be moving forward in the way of the governance. Some interesting amendments, some interesting debate that went on during that time as well, but we didn't quite finish that before we had to move on towards safeguarding, significantly important. Lots of very good points raised, including one from our very own James Kerry. I might insert the clip.
James Kerry, 246 Bath and Wells, 246 Bath and Wells, sorry about that. Full disclosure, I'm one of the two representatives of the House of Laity on the Archbishop's Council and one of the two representatives of the Archbishop's Council on the National Safeguarding and Steering Group. Ask for a diagram at the help desk if you would like. All of the above means that I have a front row seat to see the incredible work being done at speed by the safeguarding team. It's hard work. It's never done. The meetings, the ones I'm in at least, are long. The papers are excellent, thank you staff. And mistakes are made, have been made, cannot be unmade, and that has been acknowledged. But for me, it's a joy to engage with the safeguarding work because our first objective as the Archbishop's Council is the doubling of the number of children and young people in our churches. Wouldn't that be amazing? And we can do that under God. In fact, the highlight of this synod for me was 20 minutes spent in prayer at lunchtime on Tuesday. And there were some bishops here, Archbishop Stephen was here, and some members of the laity. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. We were praying together for the work of the children and young people who are not just church future, but church now. So it's vital that our churches are places where children can enjoy the safety so lacking in the world around them. I recently saw a video about some youth work going on, and a young boy said, and it's hard not to cry as I say this, that he loved church because it was the only place where he wasn't bullied. Praise God for that church and many like it, commending the love of Christ in such a practical and safe way. That's why we do this. Now, this means a few things. One is do the training and do it with joy. Not because you have to, but because you might be instrumental in preventing the abuse of a child. That'd be good, wouldn't it? Do the training with joy. Secondly, if we're serious about unity and walking together, insisting that a particular view of human sexuality is in itself a safeguarding issue is really unhelpful. Can we not do that, please? And thirdly, please take note of this report. Thank you, Synod.
We eventually voted to take note of this report, although I know there were lots of questions still standing, lots of answers still waiting to be heard. But we had timed business no later than 4:05 with the insurance premium tax, going through a motion from the Venerable Gavin Kirk, looking at the way in which public goods that are delivered by charities, including the case of churches, through their care of national valued heritage assets and the provision of community services. And the fact that the money needed by charities to meet the liabilities, including insurance premium tax, has to be raised by them, including in the case of churches through fundraising in their local communities. Call upon Her Majesty's government, or what's now His Majesty's government, to exempt charities, including churches, from liability for insurance premium tax. I'll be honest, the afternoon post the LLF, my brain was a little bit, I think it was heavy. I wasn't entirely sure that I was entirely with it, but that was voted through. We then had the prorogation where Archbishop Justin prayed for us, and that was it. That is the way in which Synod ended. That is where we left. A very confusing time for many, a very tough time for many. As I think I mentioned, my reflection earlier is that I thought obviously we want to be like this, we want to be journeying together, and it felt like we're like this. But the reality, I think, for lots of us, we are miles apart. I don't envy our bishops who are trying to unite us. I think it's a good thing to be pursuing unity, but of course we've got to pursue Christ above that. And I think it was really interesting to see throughout the whole Synod session just how diverse we are. We talk about it as one of our greatest strengths, but it is also one of our greatest weaknesses, being such a broad church. I think I'm learning that more and more. It felt like, especially in the LLF debate, that we're preaching two very different gospels. Maybe that we have two very different faiths, and our relationship and response to what the gospel means to us. It felt like we're worlds apart, and that's a very tough place to be in. There's lots of language around differentiation and settlement. I'm intrigued to see how that plays out in the months and years to come, but potentially it may be needed. I echo again that anyone who feels like they don't have a home in the Church of England, that is not the case. We need you to stay, whatever part of the church you're in. We don't want you to be turned away. What we do want to do is we want to be trying our best to journey together, but ultimately we've got to be journeying towards Christ and all the things that He has for us. So wherever you stand on this, I hope you can join us just in praying that the Spirit will continue to be poured out upon His church, that the Spirit will continue to lead His church, and especially as unpopular as they are now, we need to pray for our bishops. It's a tough job. I don't envy them in any case. I'm very grateful for our bishops here in Bath and Wells and the way in which they have journeyed alongside us as a very representative or broad represented group on General Synod. But we need to be praying. We need to keep doing what we do as the church. We can't get distracted by all this stuff because Christ has given us a mission to carry out. So let's go with that confidence. That is my thoughts. That is it for General Synod. I don't think I've got anything else really to add. Please do get in touch if you want to know more, if you've got any questions, if you'd like to chat about any of the things I may have said. I appreciate I'm doing these videos without a script. I apologise if any of the ways or language used wasn't helpful, but it probably gives the best representation of who I am, but also my response to everything that's gone down. I'm very grateful for the prayers and support that I've received from our diocese. God has got lots of good things for the Diocese of Bath and Wells, and I'm very excited to continue to play a little part, a very small part in what God's doing here. And I hope you are encouraged to continue to do the same.